tackling peak pollution, achieving environmental justice for frontline communities. Today's panel is at the Variety Boys and Girls Club of Queens in New York City. We are also live streaming this conversation for the public, and committee members have been invited to participate, and some panelists virtually. I want to thank the Boys and Girls Club and Director Costa Constantinides for inviting us, for hosting us, and for being such an outstanding environmental leader in his own right. We are here today because people in New York City and across our country are dying. It's being reported that over 3,000 New Yorkers lose their lives from health conditions related to particulate matter pollution, and our city's peaker power plants are chiefly responsible. Peakers are the dirtiest and most dangerous smokestacks used at peak times of energy demands, like today, where we're over 90 degrees in heat in New York City, and they are largely concentrated in low-income communities. For the 1.2 million New Yorkers living within 1 mile of a peaker, rates of asthma and death from COVID-19 and from other illnesses are severely elevated. In addition to the noxious fumes from peaker plants, these residents are exposed to constant pollution from large power plants that run all the time and chronic congestion. Convening with communities on the ground to address issues like this one is central to the Oversight Committee's environmental justice agenda. That's why this morning at Queensbridge Park, I met with residents of New York City's so-called Asthma Alley to discuss the issues they face and the solutions they need. The most moving testimony for me came from Mrs. Cougar, who has lived in our community for 60 years. She said she came here and the air was clean, but then they built the peaker plants, and now her grandchildren and her children have to have breathing machines because they suffer from asthma. It is plain wrong to put so many polluting peaker plants in one area. There are 10 peaker plants within 1 mile of where we are sitting today, and 28 within the vicinity of the district that I represent in Queens. And there's a hearing later on today because they want to add yet another peaker plant in Ocasio-Cortez's district. This is plain wrong. It's life-threatening. It's killing people, and we have to stop it. And this is not an isolated problem. It's a problem in Manhattan, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn. There's a whopping 89 peaker units in New York City alone. As we discussed this morning, we must pursue innovative alternatives at every level of government. This begins with community-driven solutions, which we're listening to today, ideas from the community up. We've had enough of the top telling us we need these peaker plants. We don't need them. We want to stop them. And that is what the Peak Coalition's proposal is, which I am supporting, to eliminate half of the city's 89 peakers by 2025, and all of them by 2030. We have the technology to achieve this. We just need the political will to make it happen. I wholeheartedly support this transformative undertaking and look forward to discussing other grassroots ideas as well, like building community solar in Sunset Park, or converting an inhumane jail and toxic waste site into an environmental justice hub through renewable rikers. At the federal level, we need to enact HR 2021, Environmental Justice for All Act, led by Chair of the National Resources Committee, Raul Grijalva. This bill would require agencies to consider the cumulative impacts of pollution in permitting decisions. If his bill had passed, there is no way that the peaker plant they're trying to build in her district would ever be built. What the law says now is you look at the impact of one peaker plant. So they look at one peaker plant, they think it's all right, but they're not looking at the other 89 peaker plants that are contributing to the air. 28, 10 within 1 mile of my district. They look, it's awful. We have to pass this bill that he is proposing. We also need to pass HR 3139, the Peaker Act, which was authored by our colleague, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who joined us at the community discussion prior to today, to this meeting. And this would be a tax incentive and grant program to help retire peaker plants in historically marginalized communities. Additionally, as part of the Oversight Committee's environmental justice agenda, we're developing legislation to minimize the strain placed on the electric grid that leads to the use of peakers, including by setting a 100% renewable energy target for the federal government. We also know that data is key to good policy making. So we want to deploy air quality sensors on federal buildings and vehicles so that we can tell when communities are in danger in real time. Beyond these legislative ideas, I strongly support the Biden administration's whole of government approach to environmental justice through the Justice 40 initiative. I am determined to conduct strong oversight of its implementation. We must get this right and ensure that every federal agency has the tools it needs to direct at least 40% of the benefits of infrastructure investments to frontline communities like the ones that we are in now that is over polluted. The community leaders at the table today are engaging with utilities and public regulators to address decades of environmental racism, working with frontline families to retrofit homes and reduce strain on the grid, empowering public housing residents to drive their own solutions, and identifying clean energy alternatives for communities across the country impacted by the polluting peakers. If we follow their lead, my constituents in the Queensbridge, Ravenswood, and Astoria houses will finally breathe a little easier. Finally, there are over 1,000 peakers across the country. Every impacted community needs a peak coalition fighting on their behalf for rapid change. There can be no more sacrifice zones where people are dying. I hope today's roundtable will only advance change, not only advance change in our community, but will encourage my congressional colleagues to support the legislative solutions that we will be discussing today. I am thrilled to be joined by a panel today. We will hear from Anel Hernandez, Associate Director of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance and coordinator of our Peak Coalition. Also to speak for the Peak Coalition is Anthony Carafe Rogers Wright, Director of Environmental Justice for New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. We welcome Calvin Thompson, Finance and Special Initiatives Associate for Block Power, who's with us virtually. We're also honored to have Ilana Duverge, the co-founder and director of the Movement School. And last but not least, it's our pleasure to welcome Dr. Elena Krager, who has flown from California here to be with us today, the Director of Research for the respected Research and Policy Institute, known as Research, Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy. I want to thank our remarkable panel. I also want to thank my friend and roundtable co-lead, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. She has fought fearlessly to stop an expansion of peakers in her own district, which is pollution overburden, and the solutions she champions, like the Green New Deal and the Green New Deal for public housing, are essential to empowering environmental justice communities. At this time, I want to welcome Mr. Norman, the ranking member of our environmental subcommittee. Thank you so much, Ralph, Norman,